The town woke each morning to the sound of drums rolling through the air like a heartbeat. Old men sat beneath the wide baobab tree, their voices slow and wise, speaking of ancestors and the paths that must not be broken. Not far from them, young boys laughed loudly, dreaming of cities beyond the hills, where lights never slept and names could be made in a single night. "Times are changing," one elder would say, tapping his staff gently against the ground. "And yet," another would reply, "a tree without roots will fall with the first strong wind." Women carried baskets on their heads, moving in rhythm with the land, while children chased each other through the dusty paths. The town lived between two worlds, one held tightly by tradition, the other pulling with the promise of something new. At the center of this town stood a house that no one could ignore. It rose higher than the others, its walls strong and wide, its gates heavy like the pride it carried. People did not pass it without lowering their voices. It was not just a home, it was a throne built from years of power, respect, and fear. "That house," a passing woman whispered to her friend, "has seen many seasons. But even the tallest tree can be struck by lightning." Inside those walls lived a family whose name carried weight in every corner of the village. Generations had lived there, each one adding to its honor or its burden. In this town, a woman's worth was often measured by the strength of her marriage. A wife was expected to endure, to bend like the river but never break. And above all, mothers held a sacred place. Their words shaped their sons, their approval gave life to marriages, and their disapproval could destroy them. "A man may build a house," an old woman once said, "but it is his mother who decides who may enter and stay." And in that great house, these truths lived like law. Amina moved quietly through its halls, her steps slow, careful. Her hands rested often on her swollen belly, as if to protect the life within from the harshness around her. She was gentle, her voice soft, her eyes always lowered in respect. But behind that silence was a river of pain. She carried not just a child, but the weight of a home that no longer felt like hers. "Patience," she would whisper to herself at night, lying on her mat. "A calm river reaches its destination. Yet even rivers can be forced to overflow." There was a time when Kwame would sit beside her, his laughter warm like the evening sun. He would speak of dreams, of children running in the yard, of a future built together. But that time had begun to fade. Now, his eyes no longer searched for hers. His words had grown few, his presence distant. Where love once lived, pride had taken its place. "Respect is what builds a man," he told a friend one evening, his voice firm. "And what of love?" the friend asked. Kwame paused, then looked away. "Love follows respect." But deep within, something had already begun to shift. Watching over all of this was Mama Abina. Her presence filled the house like a storm waiting to break. Her back was straight, her gaze sharp, and her voice carried the authority of generations before her. She believed in strength, in control, in the kind of order that left no room for weakness. "A family without discipline," she would say, "is like a goat without a rope, it will destroy itself." To her, Amina was not strong enough. Too quiet, too soft. Not the kind of woman who could carry the weight of their name. She did not hide her thoughts. "A wife must hold her husband like a firm hand holds water," she once said coldly. "If she is too loose, she loses everything." And Amina heard every word, even when none were spoken directly to her. But beyond the gates of that proud house, another presence was rising, one that carried the scent of change and disruption. Zola. She walked through the town with confidence that turned heads. Her clothes were bold, her laughter loud, her eyes filled with ambition. She was not bound by the same quiet rules as the village women. "Why should I hide my shine?" she once said with a smile. "The sun does not ask for permission to rise." Men admired her. Women whispered about her. And slowly, her name found its way into conversations that reached even the walls of the great house. Kwame had seen her. And once seen, she was not easily forgotten. Where Amina was calm like a river, Zola was fire, bright, dangerous, impossible to ignore. And as the drums of the town continued to beat, carrying stories from one ear to another, a new story was beginning to take shape. One that would test love, break trust, and reveal a truth the whole village would not be able to ignore. The days no longer moved with kindness for Amina. What was once seen as a blessing had now become a weight in the eyes of the house. Her pregnancy, which should have brought songs and soft care, was now treated like a burden that slowed everyone down. She walked carefully across the compound, one hand supporting her back, the other resting on her belly. Each step was heavy, not just from the child she carried, but from the coldness that surrounded her. As she bent to sweep the floor, her breath grew uneven. She paused, holding her side. From across the room, Mama Abina's voice struck like a whip. "Even the wind moves faster than you," she said. "Or is it that you enjoy showing your weakness?" Amina swallowed her pain. "Mother, I am trying." "Trying will not keep a husband," Mama Abina replied sharply. "A woman who cannot stand strong will be left behind." The words settled deep. In that moment, Amina understood something she had been refusing to see. She was no longer seen as a wife in that house. She was becoming invisible. Meals were eaten without calling her. Decisions were made without her voice. Even the servants had begun to look past her, as if she were a shadow passing through walls. That night, she sat alone, the moonlight falling softly on her face. "My child," she whispered, her voice trembling, "how did we become strangers in a place we once called home?" But the silence gave no answer. Mama Abina's disdain did not rest. It grew stronger with each passing day, like a fire that had found endless fuel. One morning, she stood before Amina, her eyes cold and unyielding. "Do you know why a pot cracks?" she asked. Amina shook her head softly. "Because it was not made strong enough to hold what was poured into it," Mama Abina said. "You are that pot." Amina felt the words cut deep. "I have given my respect to this home," she said quietly. "I have done all that is asked of me." "And yet, you have failed," Mama Abina replied without hesitation. "A man should be proud to stand beside his wife. But tell me, does Kwame look at you with pride?" Amina's lips parted, but no words came out. Mama Abina turned away with a dismissive wave of her hand. "A weak woman brings shame, even if she carries a child." Each word planted a seed of humiliation, growing silently inside Amina's heart. Far from the weight of that house, Kwame found himself drawn into a different world. Under the golden light of the afternoon, he sat with Zola, her laughter dancing in the air like music. "You think too much," Zola said, smiling as she looked at him. "Life is not meant to be carried like a heavy load." Kwame exhaled, as if her presence gave him relief. "A man must think," he replied. "He must protect his name." "And what is a name without happiness?" Zola asked, tilting her head. "Would you rather be respected and miserable, or alive and admired?" Her words wrapped around his thoughts, soft but powerful. With her, he felt seen. With her, he felt strong. "A man shines brighter," Zola continued, "when he stands beside a woman who lifts him, not one who slows him down." Kwame nodded slowly, her voice feeding his pride. In that moment, he did not remember the quiet woman who waited at home. He did not remember the promises made under sacred vows. Like a traveler chasing a distant light, he forgot the path he once walked. But in the village, nothing stays hidden for long. The market became a place not just for trade, but for whispers. "I saw Kwame with her," one woman said, lowering her voice. "The one who walks like she owns the ground," another replied. "Yes, that one." A group of elders sat nearby, their faces heavy with concern. "When a man forgets the woman who carries his child," one elder said slowly, "he forgets the future of his own blood." Another nodded. "And when a mother allows it, she invites disgrace into her house." The wind carried these whispers from one corner of the village to another, growing louder with each telling. Something was coming. Everyone could feel it. Then the announcement came. A celebration. Not just any gathering, but one filled with drums, food, and honored guests. "The great house will open its gates," a young boy said excitedly. "There will be dancing all night," another added. But among the older ones, there was no joy. "A celebration without clear purpose," an old woman murmured, "often hides a dangerous truth." Eyes began to turn toward the great house, questions forming but not yet spoken aloud. Inside, preparations moved quickly. Cloths were hung. Pots were filled. The sound of movement filled every corner. But beneath it all, there was something else, something heavy and unspoken. Amina stood quietly near the doorway, watching as others moved around her as if she were not there. Then Mama Abina approached. "When the guests arrive," she said firmly, "you will go upstairs." Amina looked up, confusion in her eyes. "Mother, why?" "You ask too many questions," Mama Abina replied. "There are things you are not meant to see." Amina's hand tightened over her belly. "But I am part of this home," she said softly. Mama Abina's face hardened. "A part that can be hidden," she said coldly. "Do not forget your place." The words struck like thunder in Amina's chest. Later, as the sun began to set, she climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavier than the last. From above, she could hear the distant sound of drums beginning to rise. Boom, boom, boom. They echoed through the walls like a warning. Amina sat alone in the dim room, her breathing slow, her heart restless. "What is this storm that gathers?" she whispered. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, carrying with it a silence that felt too loud. And in that silence, something unseen began to take shape. Something that would soon break not just her heart, but the very soul of the house itself. The sun had barely risen, yet the weight of the day already sat heavy on Amina's back. Her hands trembled as she lifted the clay pot filled with water, her swollen belly pressing against her thin wrapper. Each step felt like walking through fire. The child within her shifted, as if crying out for rest, but rest was a luxury that had long abandoned her. "Mama Abina said the courtyard must shine before noon," a young girl whispered from the doorway. Amina forced a faint smile. "It will shine," she replied, though her voice carried pain. But before she could straighten her back, a sharp voice pierced the air like a spear. "Still standing there?" Mama Abina's eyes burned with disapproval. "A strong wife does not complain. Or have you already failed my son?" Amina lowered her gaze. "I am trying, Mama. Trying." Mama Abina scoffed. "In my days, women carried twins and still worked from sunrise to moonlight. Weakness is not a virtue, it is a shame." The words struck deep, cutting through Amina's silence. She swallowed her pain, but her heart tightened. From the far end of the compound, Kwame appeared, adjusting his fine cloth as though preparing for a celebration. His eyes met Amina's for a brief moment, but there was no warmth left in them. "Kwame!" Amina called softly, hope trembling in her voice. But he turned away, pretending not to hear. His steps were quick, almost eager, as if escaping a burden he no longer wished to carry. Mama Abina smiled faintly. "Do you see? Even your husband knows where peace lives. A man will not stay where there is weakness." Amina's chest rose and fell slowly. The courtyard around her felt smaller, as though the walls themselves were closing in. Beyond the compound, whispers traveled like wind through dry leaves. "A good wife endures," one elder murmured. "A woman's strength is proven through suffering," another added. "These are the ways of our people," a third voice concluded. Their words reached Amina's ears, not as comfort, but as chains. Each whisper tightened around her spirit, binding her to a pain she could not escape. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her voice had become a stranger to her, lost beneath the weight of expectations. Silence wrapped around her like a prison, cold and unyielding. Inside her, a storm began to rise. Should I continue like this? She wondered. Is this what it means to be a wife? To be a mother? Her hands instinctively moved to her belly. The child stirred again, gentle yet alive, a small reminder that something within her still fought to survive. "My child," she whispered, her voice breaking, "what kind of world am I bringing you into?" For a moment, strength flickered in her eyes. But it quickly tangled with fear. If she stayed silent, she might lose herself. If she spoke, she might lose everything. Her gaze drifted toward the staircase that led to the upper rooms, where Mama Abina ruled and decisions were made without question. The steps stood tall, almost proud, as if guarding power itself. Below them, Amina stood, tired, unseen, and unheard. The distance between those steps and where she stood was small in space, yet vast in meaning. Above was authority. Below was endurance. And Amina remained in between, caught in a world where humanity bowed before power, and where her next step could change everything. Amina stood at the foot of the staircase, her hand resting lightly on the wooden rail. She did not climb, yet she did not step away. It was as if her feet had forgotten their purpose. Family, once a shield, had become a spear. Mama Abina stood tall, her face unshaken. A house must be protected, she said, even if it means removing what weakens it. Amina looked at her, disbelief in her eyes. I am not your enemy. But her words fell into silence. Around them, the crowd stood frozen, feet rooted to the earth, eyes wide, yet empty of action. Fear moved among them like an unseen spirit. No one wished to challenge authority. No one wished to carry the burden of speaking against power. This is wrong, a young woman whispered to her friend. Then speak, the friend replied quietly. But the young woman lowered her head. I cannot. And so, silence became a shield for injustice. The drums had stopped now. Only the heavy breathing of pain remained. In that stillness, the moment stretched long, like a shadow at sunset. It carried a lesson the ancestors once spoke. When power forgets compassion, it becomes a fire that burns its own home. Amina reached the final step. Her body could carry no more. Her legs gave way beneath her, and she sank to the ground. Not gently, but with the weight of everything she had endured. Dust rose around her, wrapping her like a silent witness. Her face was pale. Her breath was weak. But her eyes still held something unbroken. She looked up, not with defeat, but with a quiet strength that refused to die. Then, slowly, her body collapsed fully onto the earth. The sound was soft, yet it echoed louder than any drum. A fall, yes, but not surrender. It was a call for truth. A call that hung in the air, waiting for someone, anyone, to answer. For a brief moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then Amina's body trembled. A sharp cry escaped her lips, deeper than pain, heavier than fear. My child, she gasped, clutching her belly as her fingers dug into the fabric. Her face twisted, not just in hurt, but in danger. Something had changed. The women closest to her saw it first. The way her body stiffened. The way her breath came in broken pieces. This is not normal, one woman whispered, her voice shaking. This is not the pain of a simple fall. Amina let out another cry, louder now, raw and filled with terror. Please, help me, something is wrong. The life within her was no longer quiet. It fought, as if knocking against the door of the world too soon. And in that moment, motherhood stood at the edge of death. The drums that once sang of joy suddenly lost their voice. One by one, the beats faded into silence. The dancers stopped mid-step. The laughter died on lips. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if afraid to carry what was unfolding. What has happened? A man asked, his voice low. No, this is bad, another replied, stepping back as fear spread like fire through dry grass. The celebration, once bright like the morning sun, turned dark like a coming storm. All eyes shifted, not to the decorated entrance, not to the prepared feast, but to the woman lying on the ground, fighting for breath. Zola stood at the edge of the gathering, dressed in colors meant to shine like royalty. Beads rested on her neck, and her head was held high, just moments ago. Now, her pride faltered. Her eyes moved from the crowd to Amina, then back again. Why is everyone looking like this? She muttered, her voice uncertain. This is my day. But her words felt empty. The glory she expected slipped through her fingers like sand. The eyes that once admired her now held questions and doubt. Is this the woman they brought to replace a wife? Someone murmured. Zola's smile faded. For the first time, she felt the weight of what she had stepped into. Mama Abina stood still. Her back, once straight with pride, seemed to bend under an unseen force. Her eyes fixed on Amina, but they no longer held control. They held something else, something unfamiliar. Fear. This is nothing, she said quickly, though her voice lacked its usual strength. She is only pretending. She is weak. Another cry from Amina cut her words in half. Louder. Sharper. Real. Mama Abina's lips parted, but no sound followed. The ground beneath her authority began to crack. And from the edge of the crowd, A slow voice rose. Enough. It was not loud, but it carried power like the deep roots of an ancient tree. An elder stepped forward, his staff touching the earth with each step. His face was lined with years, his eyes filled with knowing. The people made way for him without question. Move, he said gently, yet firmly. Let truth walk where silence once stood. He knelt beside Amina, placing a careful hand near her, not touching, but feeling the weight of her suffering. This woman carries more than her body can bear, he said. Kwame swallowed hard. It is not as you think. The elder raised his hand. Silence, he said. When a child speaks from the womb, even the proud must listen. He turned to the crowd, his voice rising just enough to reach every ear. A pregnant woman is not just a person. She is a path, a bridge between yesterday and tomorrow. Murmurs moved through the people. She carries the future, the elder continued. To harm her is to harm what has not yet been born. It is to spit on the blessings of the ancestors. Mama Abina's face grew pale. We meant no harm, she said weakly. The elder's eyes sharpened. Intent does not wash away action. He planted his staff firmly into the ground. In our traditions, he said, his voice heavy now, when a mother is mistreated, the earth remembers. The spirits watch. And curses do not knock before they enter. A chill passed through the crowd. Some stepped back. Others looked at Mama Abina and Kwame with new eyes. You play with power, the elder said, his gaze piercing. But power without compassion is a fire. And fire does not choose what it burns. Kwame lowered his head. Zola looked away. Mama Abina's hands trembled slightly, though she tried to hide it. Around them, whispers began to rise. Soft at first. Then stronger. This is wrong. She could lose the child. No, this should not have happened. The silence that once protected cruelty began to break. And like the first crack of thunder before rain, the voices of the people started to gather, ready to speak what had long been buried. Kwame stood frozen, but his eyes could no longer run. They rested on Amina, on her trembling body, on her weak breaths, on the pain written across her face like a story carved into stone. For the first time, he truly saw her, not as a burden, not as a problem, but as the woman who once held his hand with trust. Amina! His voice came out low, almost broken. I did not see. The elder's words echoed in his ears like distant thunder. To harm her is to harm the future. Kwame's chest tightened. Shame, sharp and sudden, pierced through his pride. His hands, once strong with authority, now felt heavy, useless. What have I done? He whispered, more to himself than anyone else. Amina cried out again, her body shaking. And with that cry, something inside Kwame began to crack. Fear rose in him like a flood. Not fear of the people. Not fear of judgment. But fear of loss. Real loss. If something happens to her, he muttered, his voice trembling. If I lose them both. His words could not finish. Because deep inside, he knew the truth. This was no longer a game of pride. This was life and death. And his choices had led them here. Kwame took a step forward, then another, as if trying to walk back through time. I did not mean for this, he said, his voice shaking. I was blind. I was foolish. But the air did not soften for him. The ground did not open to hide his guilt. His regret came like rain after the harvest had already failed. Too late. Too empty. His knees weakened, and he lowered his head. I have broken what I was meant to protect, he whispered. Not far from him, Zola stood still, her eyes fixed on Amina. The noise of the crowd faded around her. All she could see was the truth unfolding before her. This is not a home, she said quietly, almost to herself. Her fingers tightened around her dress. This is a place of pain. She looked at Kwame, then at Mama Abina. The pride she once carried began to slip away. No crown is worth this, she murmured. The illusion had shattered, and she could no longer stand inside it. The elder slowly rose, his staff firm in his hand. Today, he said, his voice calm but powerful. "The masks have fallen." No one moved. No one spoke. "Truth does not shout," he continued. "It stands, and waits to be seen." His eyes swept across the crowd. "And today all have seen." Mama Abina lowered her gaze. Kwame stood exposed. Zola stepped back, her silence louder than words. Nothing remained hidden. And in that moment, justice began to breathe. From the edges of the crowd, women began to move. Not in fear, but in unity. One knelt beside Amina. Another brought cloth. Another held her hand. "Stay with us," one woman whispered gently. "You are not alone." Amina's eyes fluttered, her breath still weak. "We are here," another said, her voice firm with strength. "No harm will come to you again." They formed a circle around her. A shield. A family not by blood, but by shared truth. The sound of drums no longer returned. The decorations no longer mattered. The feast stood untouched. What was once a celebration had turned to ash. Guests began to step back slowly, their faces heavy. "This is not joy," a man said softly. "This is shame," another replied. The compound, once filled with pride, now carried silence like a burden. Kwame felt it most of all. The eyes that once respected him now held disappointment. "He failed her," someone whispered. "A man who cannot protect his wife cannot lead," another voice added. Each word struck deeper than any blade. Kwame did not respond. He could not. Because for the first time, he knew they were right. Mama Abina lifted her head, as if to speak. But the crowd no longer waited for her voice. "She went too far," a woman said openly. "Tradition is not cruelty," another added. Mama Abina's lips trembled. Her power, once unshaken, now slipped through her fingers like dry sand. She stood, but no longer stood above. Zola took a slow step backward. Then another. No one called her name. No one stopped her. She looked once more at Amina, then turned away. Without a word, she walked out. Her ambition left with her, quiet and defeated. Kwame finally moved closer, his steps slow, uncertain. He knelt at a distance from Amina, not daring to touch her. "Amina," his voice broke. "Forgive me, if your heart still has space for such a man." But even as he spoke, he felt the weight of his words. Some wounds do not heal with apology. Some bridges do not rebuild with regret. Amina's eyes slowly opened. Weak, but no longer empty. She did not look at him. Instead, she looked at the women around her. At the hands holding her. At the strength lifting her. And something within her shifted. Pain still lived in her body. But silence no longer lived in her soul. She took a slow breath. Then another. And though her voice was faint, it carried a new kind of power. "I am still here," she whispered. "Not as a victim, but as a woman who had seen the depth of darkness, and chosen not to disappear within it." And in that quiet declaration, a new story began to rise from the ashes of the old. The elder's voice did not end in the compound that day. It traveled, like wind moving through tall grass, like a drumbeat that refuses to fade. In the market, women spoke of it in low voices. "Did you hear what happened in that great house?" one asked. "Yes," another replied, shaking her head. "The elder has spoken truth. A man who forgets compassion invites his own fall." Under the shade of the baobab tree, old men repeated the lesson to the young. "Pride is a fire," one elder said slowly. "If you do not control it, it will burn your own home first." Children listened. Women remembered. Men grew quiet. And the story became more than an event. It became a warning. A lesson carried from mouth to mouth, from heart to heart. The great house that once stood like a throne now stood like a reminder. Its walls still strong. Its gates still tall. But something inside it had broken. Not by enemies. Not by storms. But from within. "Did you see?" a passerby whispered. "All that power, yet it could not save them from their own pride." Another replied, "A house built on arrogance will always fall, no matter how high it stands." The compound no longer commanded respect. It carried a shadow, a silence that spoke louder than drums ever could. And within that silence, a deeper truth settled over the village. Women gathered in small circles, speaking gently but firmly. "A woman who carries life," one said, placing her hand on her chest, "carries the future of us all." "She must be protected," another added. "Not shamed. Not broken." The elder's words returned again, like an echo that refused to die. To dishonor a mother is to dishonor the land itself. Heads nodded. Eyes softened. And a sacred understanding took root once more. Motherhood was not weakness. It was power. Quiet. Deep. Unbreakable when honored. In time, another lesson rose beside it. One that even the proud could not ignore. "Power is not in shouting," an old woman said as she stirred her pot. "It is not in control." She looked at the younger women around her. "True power is in how you hold others when they are weak." Kindness became strength. Justice became honor. And the village began to remember what it had almost forgotten. Days later, the sun rose gently over a different kind of scene. Amina rested, her body still healing. A child lay close to her, small and precious, like a promise returned. The women surrounded her once more. One fanned her softly. Another brought warm water. Another sang a low, comforting song. "You are not alone," one whispered. Amina's eyes, once filled with pain, now held something new. Strength. Not loud. Not proud. But steady. She placed her hand over her child and closed her eyes for a moment. In that quiet breath, she was no longer just surviving. She was rising. Not far away, the great house stood still. Its doors closed. Its yard empty. No laughter. No music. Only silence. The kind that comes after truth has spoken. The kind that lingers where arrogance once lived. People passed by, but no one stopped. No one admired. No one envied. The throne had fallen. And it had taken its pride with it. But beyond that silence, life continued. And from pain, something stronger had grown. The story did not end with suffering. It ended with truth standing tall. A truth earned through tears. A dignity rebuilt through courage. And as the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the village, the lesson remained clear. That even in the darkest moments, justice will rise. Truth will speak. And a woman, once broken by silence, can become the voice that changes everything.